She thought pouring coffee was her only job that night. He thought she was invisible, just another face in an apron, there to serve and stay silent while he destroyed a family with ink and paper. But when billionaire Damon Caldwell slid that contract across the table, confident in his victory, he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman holding the water pitcher. What happened next would cost him everything. This is the story of Emery Dawson, a woman who lost everything, became invisible to survive, and then used that invisibility as her greatest weapon. Let me tell you about the night Emery Dawson became dangerous.
She didn't know it yet.
Standing there in her sensible black shoes, feet throbbing from her third double shift that week, she thought she was just trying to survive. Rent was overdue. Her mother's medical bills were piling up like accusations. And the Golden Heron, this palace of crystal and whispered deals, was the only thing standing between her and absolute ruin. The Golden Heron wasn't just a restaurant. It was a temple where Chicago's elite came to worship at the altar of power. The kind of place where menus didn't list prices because if you had to ask, you didn't belong. The lighting was designed to make wrinkles disappear and secrets feel safe. And Emery? She was a ghost moving between tables, pouring water, refilling wine glasses, existing in that strange space where the wealthy pretend the help isn't really human. Marco, the floor manager, treated his staff like malfunctioning machines. Table 7 needs water, Emery. Snap to it. His voice always carried that edge, that reminder that she was replaceable, forgettable, nothing. On it, Marco, she murmured, grabbing the chilled pitcher. Table 7 was the power corner, the booth where deals worth millions were made over $100 stakes. Tonight, 3 men occupied it, and the energy was all wrong. 2 of them looked like they were drowning. Arthur and David Pellegrino, brothers who owned a historic construction company that was bleeding out slowly. Emery had seen their pictures in the business section of newspapers left behind by other diners. The third man was different. He owned the space around him like he'd purchased it.
Damon Caldwell.
Even someone like Emery, who tried to ignore the world of high finance, knew that name. Corporate raider. A man who didn't buy companies to save them. He bought them to butcher them, to strip them clean and walk away counting his money, while families fell apart. She approached quietly, moving with the practiced invisibility that good service requires. As she began refilling water glasses, Damon was talking, his voice smooth and cold like expensive whiskey with poison mixed in. "You're being sentimental, Arthur," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Sentimentality doesn't pay creditors. I'm offering you a lifeline here, a generous one." Arthur's hands were shaking as he wiped sweat from his forehead. "It's not just a company, Damon. It's our father's legacy. If we sell the majority share, we lose control. We promised the union. We promised them we'd protect their pension fund." Damon laughed, a sound that made Emery's skin crawl. "The pension fund is safe. My legal team drafted this specifically to ensure a smooth transition." He pulled out a thick document and slid it across the mahogany table with the confidence of a man who'd never lost. "Look, I have dinner in London tomorrow.
I need this signed tonight.
Do you really want to go into bankruptcy court next week and explain to your employees why you turned down a $40 million injection?" David, the younger brother, looked at Arthur with desperation in his eyes. "He's right, Artie. We're drowning. The bank called again this morning. They're threatening to seize the equipment." Emery should have walked away. Marco was watching from across the room, his eyes narrowed like a hawk's. If she lingered too long, she'd get written up. If she interfered with the guests, she'd be fired. And she needed this job desperately, needed the tips that barely kept her and her mother afloat. But then something caught her eye. The contract was lying open on the table, and even though it was upside down from where she stood, her brain, that part of her that refused to die even after she'd lost everything, started processing the words automatically. You see, what nobody at that table knew was that Emery Dawson had once been somebody. She'd been top of her class at Yale Law School. She'd had a gift for reading contracts, for spotting the trap hidden in the maze of legal language. She could see patterns where others saw only boring text. She'd been months away from graduating, months away from a future that glittered with promise. And then her father died. Died under a cloud of scandal and accusation, leaving behind nothing but debt and shame. Her mother had a stroke from the stress. Someone had to pay the medical bills. Someone had to drop everything and become invisible to survive. That someone was Emery. But even though she'd traded her law books for an apron, her mind still worked the same way. And as she stood there, pretending to straighten the water glasses, her eyes locked onto a paragraph buried deep in the contract. Pursuant to Section 8.4, subsection C, the acquiring entity retains the right to restructure all liabilities, including but not limited to defined benefit plans, categorizing them as unsecured debt in the event of a subsidiary restructuring. Her blood went cold. It wasn't standard language. It was a kill switch, a trapdoor. Damon was promising to protect the pension fund while simultaneously giving himself the legal right to destroy it completely. All he had to do was move the company into a subsidiary shell, declare bankruptcy, and walk away. The workers would get nothing. Their retirement gone. Their security vaporized. And these two brothers, these decent men being crushed by circumstances, had no idea. Arthur picked up the pen. His hand was trembling so badly the pen shook like a leaf in a storm. "Okay," he whispered, his voice breaking. "For the workers." The word came out of Emery's mouth before she could stop it.
No.
It was barely more than a breath, but in the tense silence of that booth, it landed like a thunderclap. Damon's head snapped up. For the first time, he actually looked at her. Really looked. And what he saw was exactly what he expected to see. A tired waitress in a cheap uniform. Nobody. Nothing. He sneered. "More water? We didn't ask for any." "Emery." Marco's voice hissed from across the room. He was already marching toward them, his face red with fury. Arthur paused, the pen hovering just millimeters from the signature line. He looked up at this waitress, confused and desperate. "Miss?" Emery's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Every survival instinct screamed at her to apologize, to back away, to disappear back into invisibility where it was safe. But she looked at Arthur's face, really looked at it, and saw her father. Saw that same expression of defeat, of being cornered by forces too big to fight. "Don't sign that," she said, her voice stronger now, steady despite the fear flooding through her body. Damon actually laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound. "Excuse me? I think you've confused your station, sweetheart. The kitchen is that way." "I'm not confused," Emery said, stepping closer to the table. Marco was almost there now, his hand reaching out to grab her arm. But she had seconds, just seconds, to do this. She pointed at the document with a trembling finger. Page 14, paragraph 6, subsection C. Damon's smile flickered. Just for a moment, something like uncertainty crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" David asked, looking between the billionaire and the waitress. "He told you the pension fund was safe," Emery said, her eyes locked on Damon's. "He lied. That clause, it's a trap." "This is absurd." Damon stood up, so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Manager, get this woman out of here immediately. She's harassing my clients." Marco arrived, breathless and furious. "I am so sorry, Mr. Caldwell." Emery, step away from the table.
Now.
"You're done for the night. Get your things." "Wait," Arthur said, and the desperation in that single word stopped everyone. The old man looked at Emery like she was the last life raft on a sinking ship. "What trap? What does it say?" "Arthur, don't listen to the help," Damon snapped, adjusting his cufflinks with sharp, angry movements. "She's looking for a handout. It's pathetic." Emery spoke rapidly, the words tumbling out before Marco could physically remove her. "It says that the acquiring entity, that's him, can reclassify your employees' pensions as unsecured debt if he moves your company into a subsidiary shell. Which he will do. Once he does that, he can declare the subsidiary bankrupt, walk away with your assets, and the pension fund goes to zero. Your workers won't get a dime." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. David grabbed the contract and pulled it closer, squinting at the dense text. Subsection C. Restructure liabilities. Damon's face turned a deep, ugly red. You have no idea what you're reading. You're a waitress. Do you even have a college degree? Something inside Emery snapped. All the shame, all the years of being invisible, all the rage at what had been taken from her, it crystallized into cold, hard fury. I have enough education to recognize a bad boy carve-out when I see one, she said, her voice like steel. And I know that what you're trying to do is technically legal, but morally bankrupt. You're not buying their company to save it. You're buying it to liquidate the pension fund and cover your own leverage. David looked up, his face pale as death. Artie, I think she's right. This wording, it's exactly what happened to Highland Construction last year. They lost everything. Arthur dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell to the floor with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Damon stared at Emery. The mask of civility dropped completely, and what lay beneath was cold, calculating, and genuinely dangerous. You just made a very big mistake, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Do you know who I am? I know what you are, Emery replied, her chin held high even though her legs were shaking. Marco, Damon barked, not looking away from her. Fire her.
Now.
And ensure she never works in this city again. If I see her face in any establishment within 5 miles of the loop, I will buy the building and evict you personally. Marco grabbed Emery's arm hard enough to leave bruises. Get out, Emery. You're fired. Don't even bother clocking out. I'm leaving, Emery said, pulling her arm free. She looked at Arthur one last time. Don't sign anything without a lawyer present. A real lawyer, not one he pays for. She turned and walked away, her head high even as her entire world collapsed around her. She could feel Damon's eyes burning into her back, branding her with his rage. She had saved the Pellegrino brothers, but she had just signed her own death warrant. As she pushed through the kitchen doors, stripping off her apron with shaking hands, she didn't realize that someone else had been watching the entire exchange from the shadows. Someone who had been looking for exactly the kind of trouble Emery had just caused. That someone was about to change everything. 3 days. That's how long it took for Emery to realize that Damon Caldwell wasn't just vindictive, he was thorough. She sat on the curb outside her apartment building, the Chicago wind cutting through her thin coat like a knife made of ice. In her hand was her phone, displaying rejection number 7. A diner on the south side. The manager had sounded apologetic but firm. We've decided to go in a different direction. It was the same script everywhere. Coffee shops, dive bars, even a 24-hour truck stop an hour outside the city. The interviews went well until they ran her name. Then suddenly positions were filled. References checked out badly. Someone had flagged her in the restaurant industry database, probably Marco, marking her as theft risk or insubordinate or whatever label would make her untouchable. Without that job, she was 7 days away from not being able to afford her mother's heart medication. The medication that kept Sarah Dawson alive. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Rent plus late fee due by 8 p.m. tomorrow, or eviction notice filed. Emery put her head in her hands. She'd done the right thing. She knew she had. But doing the right thing didn't pay bills. It didn't keep your mother's heart beating. It just left you alone on a cold curb, watching your life crumble like ash. Rough night. Emery looked up sharply. A black sedan was idling at the curb, sleek and expensive, the kind of car that cost more than most people made in a year. The window rolled down, revealing a woman with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that looked like designer weapons. I'm not looking for a ride, Emery said wearily, too tired even to be afraid. I know, the woman said, her voice crisp and commanding. I'm looking for a waitress who reads contracts better than most junior partners at law firms. Emery stood up slowly, brushing grit from her jeans. Who are you? My name is Victoria Sterling, the woman said. And I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. Damon Caldwell. Emery stiffened, her body going rigid. If he sent you to threaten me again, tell him I have nothing left to take. Victoria laughed, a dry, sharp sound that had edges to it. Oh, my dear. I'm not working for Damon. I'm trying to destroy him. Get in the car. Emery hesitated. This was insane. Every safety rule she'd ever learned screamed at her not to get into a stranger's car. But as she looked at that eviction notice on her phone, at the rejection emails piling up in her inbox, she realized something fundamental. She had run completely out of safe options. She opened the door and slid into the leather interior that smelled like money and power. "Who are you really?" Emery asked as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "I am the chairwoman of Sterling Global," Victoria said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "And until 6 months ago, Damon Caldwell was my protege. Brilliant, ruthless, efficient. Then he tried to stage a coup, tried to oust me from my own board. He failed, but he took a significant chunk of my capital and my client list with him when he left." "He's a shark," Emery said quietly, remembering those cold blue eyes.
Yes.
"But sharks have to keep swimming or they die." Victoria turned to look at Emery directly. "I was at the Golden Heron that night. I saw what you did. You spotted a complex liability shift in seconds, upside down, while pouring water. Where did you learn that?" Emery's throat tightened. "Yale Law. Top 5%. I had to drop out in my final year. My mother got sick. My father died, leaving us buried in debt. I needed cash immediately, and law school takes time and money I didn't have." Victoria nodded as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "Damon is currently trying to acquire a tech startup called NexusStream. It's the key to his recovery. If he gets it, he becomes untouchable. If he fails, his investors will eat him alive. He's meeting with the founder, a young genius named Leo Thorne, in 3 days." "Okay. Leo is brilliant but naive," Victoria continued. "He thinks Damon is a mentor figure. He's going to sign a deal that will strip him of his intellectual property, his company, and his future. I need someone on the inside to stop it. I need someone Damon won't recognize, or at least won't suspect, until it's too late." "He knows my face," Emery said. "He fired me. He ruined me." "He knows a waitress in a uniform," Victoria corrected, her eyes gleaming. "Hair in a bun, no makeup, exhausted and invisible. He doesn't know you. Not really. To men like Damon, service staff are interchangeable ghosts. We're going to use that against him." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. She handed it to Emery. Inside was a check. The amount made Emery's breath catch in her throat. It was enough to pay off her mother's medical bills, cover the rent, and maybe, just maybe, get her back into school. "Why me?" Emery whispered, her hands trembling as she held the check. "You could hire the best lawyers in the city." "I have the best lawyers," Victoria said with a slight smirk. "But lawyers play by rules. They're predictable. You?" She gestured at Emery. "You have nothing to lose and a grudge to settle. More importantly, you have integrity. You saved those brothers when you had everything to lose. That's the kind of weapon I need." Victoria extended her hand.
"So, Emery,
"Are you ready to stop serving the table and start owning it?" Emery looked at the check, then at the city passing by outside the window. She thought of Damon's sneer. "The kitchen is that way." She thought of her father, dying with a cloud of shame over his name. She thought of all the years she'd spent invisible, swallowing her pride, pretending she was less than she was just to survive. She took Victoria's hand. "Tell me what I need to do." The transformation was surgical. Over the next 48 hours, Victoria's team rebuilt Emery like architects designing a weapon. They cut her mousy brown hair into a sleek auburn bob that framed her face like armor. They traded her sensible shoes for Italian stilettos that clicked on marble floors like the cocking of a gun. The waitress uniform was replaced by a tailored navy power suit that cost more than her old car. But the most important work was mental. Victoria drilled her relentlessly in her penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the city lights spread out below them like a battlefield map. "Damon's weakness is his ego," Victoria explained, pacing while Emery studied the NexusStream files. "He assumes he's the smartest person in any room. He assumes women are emotional and easily intimidated. Use that." Emery highlighted a section of the contract. "He buries the poison pills in the addendums. Look at this. He's offering Leo a huge upfront payment, but he structured the stock options as Class B non-voting shares. Leo thinks he's keeping 70% of the company, but he'll have zero say in how it's run. Exactly, Victoria said, impressed. He's stealing the steering wheel and leaving Leo in the passenger seat.
You need to expose that.
But you can't just shout it out like at the restaurant. You have to dismantle him surgically, piece by piece, until he bleeds out in front of everyone. On the morning of the meeting, Emery looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The tired, desperate girl who counted tips in the break room was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she could buy and sell the golden heron without blinking. "You look dangerous," Victoria said, appearing behind her in the reflection. "Mrs. Sterling, your usual room is prepared." "Actually," Victoria said, slipping him a $50 bill, "we'd prefer the boardroom adjacent to Mr. Caldwell's party." "Of course, madam." They waited in the adjacent room, separated from Damon's meeting by only a mahogany wall. Emery could hear muffled voices. She heard Damon's laugh, that same cruel, confident sound that haunted her nightmares. 40 minutes passed. Then Victoria held up her hand. "Listen." Damon's voice rose, smooth and persuasive. "Leo, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're a visionary. You shouldn't be bogged down with supply chains and HR headaches. Let me handle the boring stuff. You just create." Victoria stood up. "It's showtime." She pushed open the double doors connecting the rooms. Emery followed, her heart hammering, clutching her briefcase like a shield. The three men at the table jumped. Damon Caldwell was standing at the head, champagne bottle in hand, mid-toast. When he saw Victoria, his face went rigid. "Victoria," he said, his voice dripping with false surprise. "I didn't know you were a member here." "I own the building, Damon," Victoria said breezily, walking in. "Hello, Leo. I'm Victoria Sterling. And this is my associate, Miss Dawson." Emery stepped into the light. She looked directly at Damon. His eyes narrowed as he scanned her face. There was a flicker, a moment where his brain tried to connect this auburn-haired executive with the waitress in the apron. But the context was too different. The hair, the suit, the confidence. It threw him off. He dismissed the thought. "We're in the middle of a private meeting," Damon said coldly. "We know." Emery spoke up, her voice steady and professional. "We're here to save Mr. Thorne from making a catastrophic error." Leo Thorne, a young man in a hoodie and blazer, looked nervous. "Who are you?" "I represent an interested party," Victoria lied smoothly. "And my legal counsel here has identified some serious irregularities in the contract Mr. Caldwell presented to you." "That's impossible," Damon snapped. "My lawyers are top tier." "Then they should be fired for incompetence," Emery said, throwing her briefcase onto the table. She opened it and pulled out a red-lined copy of Damon's contract. Unless, of course, the fraud was intentional. "Fraud?" Leo sat up straighter. "Wait, what fraud?" Emery walked around the table, every step calculated. "Mr. Caldwell has categorized your proprietary code as a tangible asset rather than intellectual property in Section 12.3. Do you know what that means, Leo?" Leo shook his head. "It means that in the event of a merger," Emery continued, locking eyes with Damon, "the code belongs to the holding company, not the creator. If you leave NexusStream, you can't take your invention with you. He owns your brain." Damon slammed his hand on the table. "This is preposterous. Who are you to barge in here and slander me?" "I'm the person reading the fine print," Emery said, echoing her words from the restaurant, but with polished precision. "Just like I'm reading the Keyman insurance clause on page 19. If you get sick, Leo, or if you're deemed unfit by the board, which Damon will control, they can cash out a life insurance policy on you and fire you from your own company." Leo turned to Damon, his eyes wide with betrayal. "Damon, is that true?" Damon was sweating now, his perfect composure cracking. "Leo, these are standard protections. They're twisting words." "Are we?" Emery challenged. "Show him the vesting schedule, Damon. Show him where it says his shares dilute by 40% if revenue targets aren't met in Q2, targets that are historically impossible for a startup of this size. Damon glared at Emery. The recognition was creeping back now, the intensity of her stare, the way she pointed at documents, the precision of her words. "I know you," Damon whispered. "Do you?" Emery smiled. It was cold and hard and victorious. "Then you know I don't miss a thing." Leo stood up. He grabbed the contract from the table and ripped it in half. "Get out," he said to Damon. "The deal is off." "You idiot," Damon screamed, his mask completely shattered. "You're walking away from millions. You'll burn for this. I'll crush you." "I think you should leave, Damon," Victoria said calmly. "Before I call security. It is my building after all." Damon gathered his things, his hands shaking with rage. He stopped in front of Emery and leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. "You think you're clever?" he hissed. "But you're playing a game you don't understand. I know where I've seen you now. The Golden Heron. You're the waitress." Emery didn't flinch. She met his eyes with steel in her own. "I'm not a waitress anymore, Damon," she said quietly. "I'm the woman who just cost you $40 million. Damon stormed out, slamming the door so hard the champagne glasses rattled. Victoria turned to Leo with a warm smile. "Now, Mr. Thorne, how would you like to discuss a real partnership with Sterling Global, one where you actually get to keep your company?" As they shook hands, Emery felt a rush of adrenaline so intense it made her dizzy. She had won. She had actually won. But she'd also seen the look in Damon's eyes as he left. This wasn't over. It was war. The victory felt sweet for exactly 24 hours. Then Emery's phone rang. It was the director of Silverleaf, the assisted living facility where her mother lived. "Ms. Dawson." The woman's voice was tight, apologetic. "I'm afraid there's been an administrative issue with your mother's account. Her payment was rejected." Emery frowned, staring at her laptop screen. "That's impossible. I wrote a check 3 days ago. There are sufficient funds." "The check didn't bounce, Ms. Dawson. The account has been frozen by a court order. And the ownership of Silverleaf changed hands yesterday morning. The new management has a strict policy regarding accounts under legal review. They're initiating a transfer of your mother to a state facility this afternoon." Emery's blood turned to ice. "State facility? You can't move her. She has dementia. The stress could kill her." "Who's the new owner?" There was a pause. "A holding company called Apex Horizons." Emery dropped the phone. Apex Horizons was one of Damon Caldwell's shell companies. He hadn't just come after her job. He had bought the roof over her sick mother's head. She burst into Victoria's office without knocking. Victoria was on a call but hung up immediately when she saw Emery's face. "He bought the nursing home." Emery gasped, tears stinging her eyes. "He froze my bank account. He's evicting my mother. Today." Victoria's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. "He's trying to break you. He knows he can't outsmart you, so he's trying to bleed you out emotionally." "I have to go there," Emery said, already turning. "I have to stop them." "We'll both go," Victoria said, grabbing her coat. "And bring your briefcase. This isn't a family visit anymore. It's a hostage negotiation." When they arrived at Silverleaf, the scene was chaos. 2 orderlies were packing Sarah Dawson's belongings into cardboard boxes while the elderly woman sat in her wheelchair, confused and weeping. "Emery," Sarah cried when she saw her daughter. "They're taking my photos." "Why are they taking my photos?" "Stop," Emery shouted, rushing forward to kneel beside her mother. "It's okay, Mom. Nobody's taking you anywhere." She stood and faced the administrator, a nervous man clutching a clipboard. "On what grounds are you evicting a patient who requires critical care? This is a violation of the Patient Bill of Rights." Actually, a smooth voice came from the doorway. "It's a standard clause regarding insolvency." Damon Caldwell leaned against the doorframe in casual cashmere, looking like a man who'd just finished a round of golf. He looked at Emery with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Hello, Emery. Or is it Ms. Dawson now? I heard you're playing lawyer these days." "You monster," Emery hissed. "She has nothing to do with this." "She has everything to do with it," Damon said, walking into the room. He picked up a framed photo of Emery's father from the bedside table. Your father was Robert Dawson, wasn't he? The accountant who embezzled $8 million from the teachers' union pension fund 12 years ago. He died of a stroke before he could go to prison, leaving his family with nothing but shame and debt. It was the secret Emery had guarded fiercely. Her father had claimed innocence, said he was framed, but died before he could prove it. The courts had seized everything. I see the apple didn't fall far from the tree, Damon continued. You defrauded me at the Sapphire Club. You represented yourself as an attorney. That's a felony, Emery. Practicing law without a license. I never said I was a lawyer, Emery shot back. I said I was legal counsel, a consultant. I never signed a document. Semantics. Damon waved his hand dismissively. I filed a complaint with the Bar Association and the district attorney. They froze your assets pending investigation, which means you can't pay for this room. He leaned in close. Walk away, Emery. Quit Sterling Global. Publicly apologize to me. Admit you lied about the contract at the Golden Heron. Do that, and I'll let your mother stay here rent-free for the rest of her life. It was a devil's bargain. Her reputation and Victoria's trust in exchange for her mother's safety. Emery looked at her mother clutching a stuffed bear, eyes wide with fear. Then she looked at Victoria, who watched silently, waiting. Emery took a deep breath. You missed something, she said quietly. Damon raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You bought this facility yesterday, Emery said, her voice gaining strength. Did you read the resident contracts? Specifically the continuity of care addendum regarding acquisitions. Damon scoffed. I bought the real estate holding company. I didn't read individual patient files. You should have, Emery said, pulling out her phone. Because Silverleaf receives federal funding, which means under Title 42 of the Code of Federal Regulations, you cannot discharge a resident for non-payment while an investigation into the facility's ownership is pending. And since you just admitted to buying this place specifically to leverage a patient, that sounds like elder abuse. She held up her phone. I'm recording this, Damon. You just tried to blackmail me using a federally protected patient as collateral. If I send this to the State Health Board, they won't just fine you. They'll revoke the facility's license. Your investment goes to zero. Damon's face went pale. He stared at the phone in her hand. You wouldn't, he growled. Try me, Emery said, stepping between him and her mother. Get your people out of this room. Unfreeze my accounts by morning, or I burn this whole place down with you inside it. Damon stared at her for a long, tense moment. The hatred in his eyes was palpable. Leave the boxes, he snapped at the orderlies. He turned to Emery. You won this round, waitress. But you have no idea what's coming. The Winter Gala is Friday. I suggest you enjoy it. It'll be your last night in polite society. He spun and stormed out. Victoria let out a breath. That was magnificent. Emery slumped into a chair, hands shaking. He's going to come for me at the gala, Victoria. He's going to tell the whole city I'm the daughter of a thief. Victoria knelt beside her. Then we changed the narrative. Your father claimed he was innocent, didn't he? Yes, Emery whispered. But no one believed him. Victoria's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. Damon knew about your father too quickly. He had those details ready. Which means he didn't just Google you, he knew the file. Emery looked up. What are you saying? I'm saying Damon Caldwell started his career 12 years ago in construction finance, around the same time the teachers' union fund was raided. Victoria stood, pulling out her phone. We're going to the gala, Emery. But we're not going to dance. I'm having my forensic team pull the archives on everything, the Pellegrino deal, the Nexus Stream deal, and your father's old case. I have a suspicion that Damon didn't just find a waitress who could read contracts. I think he found the loose end he thought was buried. You think he framed my father? Emery asked, the realization hitting like a physical blow. I think, Victoria said, offering her hand. We're going to find out. And if he did, we're not just going to beat him. We're going to bury him. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of velvet, diamonds, and black ties. The most important social event of Chicago's winter season, where alliances were forged and enemies destroyed over glasses of champagne. Emery wore a gown of emerald green silk that Victoria had commissioned, backless and striking, designed to make her look like a warrior queen. But inside, she was still that terrified girl whose father died in disgrace. "Head up," Victoria murmured as they entered. "Shoulders back. You belong here." "Everyone's staring," Emery whispered. "Let them stare. They're wondering who the new power player is." Across the room, near a towering ice sculpture, stood Damon. He was surrounded by the city's elite, politicians, bankers, investors. When he saw Emery and Victoria enter, he raised his glass in a mock toast. He whispered something to the man beside him, the city's district attorney, and they both laughed. "He's talking to the DA," Emery said, her stomach churning. "Let him," Victoria said. "My team is still working. We just need a little more time." The evening crawled forward. Emery navigated conversations with surprising grace, using everything she'd learned watching the wealthy from the sidelines. Then the music stopped. Damon walked to the stage and took the microphone. The spotlight hit him, reflecting off his perfect teeth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon's voice boomed. "Thank you for supporting the Children's Hospital. Tonight is about giving back.
About honesty.
About integrity." He paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes locked on Emery. "But unfortunately, we have a fraud in our midst." The room went silent. "We have a woman here," Damon continued, pointing directly at Emery, "who has been parading around as a high-powered legal consultant. But in reality, she's an unlicensed, uneducated waitress who was fired for incompetence. And worse, she's the daughter of Robert Dawson, the man who stole the retirement savings of our city's teachers." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. People stepped away from Emery like she carried disease. The shame was suffocating. "Security," Damon called. "Please escort Ms. Dawson out. And perhaps the district attorney would like to have a word with her about practicing law without a license." 2 guards started moving toward Emery. The humiliation was total. Damon had won. Emery looked at Victoria. Victoria was staring at her phone. She looked up, eyes blazing. She nodded once. Emery didn't step back. She stepped forward. She walked past the confused security guards. She walked right up to the stage. She grabbed a microphone. "You're right, Damon," Emery said, her voice shaking then steadying. "I am a waitress. I've served coffee to half the people in this room." She turned to face the crowd. "And yes, my father was Robert Dawson. He died claiming he was innocent. I never believed him, until tonight." She turned back to Damon. "Why did you buy the nursing home, Damon? Why did you care so much about silencing a nobody waitress?" "Because you're a nuisance," Damon scoffed, though he looked uneasy. "Get off the stage." "Victoria?" Emery called. Victoria Sterling stepped forward, holding a tablet high. "Ladies and gentlemen, 20 minutes ago, my forensic accountants finished decoding the metadata from the transaction that ruined Robert Dawson 12 years ago." She swiped the tablet. The image appeared on the giant screen behind the stage. A bank transfer document, dated 12 years ago. "The money didn't go to Robert Dawson," Victoria announced. "It was routed through his account by a junior broker to frame him. The money actually ended up in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." Emery stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face. "And who owns that account?" Victoria asked the silent room. "Caldwell Holdings." "You stole the money, Damon. You framed her father to build your initial capital. You killed him." The room erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. The district attorney was on his phone, barking orders. Damon stood center stage, stripped of his lies. He looked at Emery with nothing but fear in his eyes. "You," he stammered. "You're just a waitress." Emery stepped close, her voice amplified for everyone to hear. "And here's the bill." She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. As police moved in, Damon did the one thing no one expected. He ran. He shoved a waiter, sending drinks crashing, and bolted for the service exit. Emery kicked off her heels and ran after him. Through the kitchen, a maze of steel and steam. Damon was at the loading dock, fumbling with the lock. "Damon," she screamed. He spun around, grabbing a knife from a prep table. "Stay back. I won't go to jail." "It's over," Emery said, breathing hard. "You can't buy your way out." He lunged. Emery dodged, slipping on wet tile. She fell hard. Damon loomed over her, knife raised. "You should have stayed invisible, waitress." A heavy metal tray smashed into Damon's head. He crumpled. Standing over him was Marco, her old manager from the Golden Heron, holding a dented serving tray. He looked at Damon, then at Emery. "He never tipped anyway," Marco said, reaching down to help her up. 2 months later, Emery stood in a cemetery on a gray morning. She wore a simple black coat and carried a newspaper. The headline read, "Robert Dawson exonerated posthumously." She knelt at her father's weathered headstone and placed the paper beside white lilies. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "Everyone knows. You didn't steal a dime." The wind rustled the trees. "I'm going back to school. I'm going to finish what I started. And I promise, no one will ever use a contract to hurt people like us again. Not while I'm watching." She stayed for a long time, letting years of anger and grief wash away. When she turned to leave, Victoria was waiting by her car. "You didn't have to wait," Emery said. "I have a meeting with a new client," Victoria said. "Massive biotech merger. The contracts are a mess. I need eyes on them." Emery smiled. "I'm just a student, Victoria." Victoria grinned. "Who said anything about practicing? I'm hiring you as a specialized consultant. The pay is excellent." Emery looked back at the grave one last time, then got into the car. "You didn't have to wait," Emery said. "I have a meeting with a new client," Victoria said. "Massive biotech merger. The contracts are a mess. I need eyes on them." Emery smiled. "I'm just a student, Victoria." Victoria grinned. "Who said anything about practicing? I'm hiring you as a specialized consultant. The pay is excellent." Emery looked back at the grave one last time, then got into the car. "Let's go," she said. "I want to see the fine print." The car drove toward the Chicago skyline, where glass towers gleamed in the winter sun. Inside those towers were sharks and traps and hidden clauses. But now there was also a hunter who knew exactly how to spot them. Epilogue. Emery Dawson proved that the most dangerous person in a room isn't always the billionaire at the head of the table. Sometimes it's the invisible witness pouring the water. By using her sharp mind to dismantle Damon Caldwell's empire of lies, she didn't just save a family legacy, she reclaimed her own. Her story is a powerful reminder that while arrogance shouts, truth whispers. And eventually, the truth always wins. It teaches us never to judge someone by their uniform, because the person you underestimate today might hold the key to your downfall tomorrow. If you cheered when Emery exposed the fraud and cleared her father's name, I hope this story stayed with you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone in power? How did you prove them wrong? Remember, the fine print isn't just in contracts. It's in life. And sometimes, the people who read it best are the ones nobody bothered to see.